He hurt you, perhaps betrayed you, devalued you, ignored you, acted like you were nothing, and in this second, everything inside you screams, "Tell him, explain, show him how wrong he is, let him understand what he lost." But stop, because that's exactly what he's waiting for. He's ready for tears, for accusations, for anger, because all of this reinforces his illusion of power. But there's one scenario he's absolutely not prepared for: your silence. Not icy, not evil, but conscious, mature silence. The silence of a woman who will no longer prove, explain, or fight. A man can be sure he has power over you as long as you react. Any emotion, even anger, is a connection. He can leave, but if you call him back, he's still on the pedestal. But when you disappear from this equation, leaving no scream, no pain, not even a hint of a scene, that's when something he can't control launches in his head. Silence gives him no answer, and he begins to search for it within himself. And this is scary, because for the first time, he's forced not to explain your behavior, but to deal with his own. This is the moment when a man confronts his own shadow, not because of your words, but because of their absence. Carl Jung said that true change begins in silence, when a person is left alone with themselves. It's precisely silence that exposes in him what he hid for so long. The fear of being nothing, the fear of losing power, the fear that he's not at all who he tried to appear to be. And now imagine what happens if you don't just fall silent, but also direct all your energy toward yourself. Not for him, for you. Then your departure becomes not an act of weakness, but an act of the greatest strength. And the man feels this, not because you tried to prove something to him, but because he can no longer prove anything to himself. And here's where it gets most interesting. Because when he loses control, he loses himself. And that's exactly what the next point is about. For the first time in a long time, he experiences silence, not as a pause between conflicts, but as the final stop of a game where he's no longer the lead. This silence isn't passive. It's filled with your power, because now when you no longer give energy outward, it returns to you. You're like gathering piece by piece everything you spent on justifying his actions, on internal dialogues, on attempts to reach a closed heart. This energy no longer goes into the abyss where it wasn't valued. It begins to nourish you, and he feels this. Even if you say nothing, he senses the change at some instinctive level. Before, he was the center of your attention, and this fed his ego. But now everything has changed. The center has shifted, no longer him, but you. You became the axis of your own universe, and this is destructive for someone who was used to being the sun, around which everything revolves. He may try to occupy your attention again, perhaps send a meaningless message, pretend he accidentally stumbled upon your profile, try to provoke any reaction. But if you stand firmly on your internal ground, if you no longer react according to the pattern, his strategy collapses. He can no longer control a single one of your movements. And if he doesn't control, he loses the most important illusion, that he was irreplaceable. Losing your reaction, he loses power. Losing power, he loses the meaning of the game he was playing, because everything he did was fed by your participation. And now you're outside the battlefield, and he remains not a victorious hero, but a lonely player in a destroyed arena. And the most excruciating thing, he can't stop this, because the only way to regain his influence is to get access to your energy again. But the door is already closed. And at this time, you begin to feel not only the return of strength, but also a new direction for it. Before, everything in your life revolved around his opinion, moods, decisions. And now for the first time you ask yourself, what do I want? What if I direct all this not toward survival in a relationship, but toward my own life, my growth, my inner peace? And in this moment, a turning point occurs. This is where the real reclaiming of power begins, because a woman who stops being a reaction to a man becomes an action. She no longer asks, doesn't demand, doesn't wait. She goes. She doesn't go from him. She goes to herself. And in this movement there's no hysteria, no resentment, no revenge. There's only a return to her true self. Before, she gave everything: attention, time, energy, faith, tears. And now she's like gathering from fragments her internal wholeness. Not because he apologized, not because recognition came, but because she no longer needs external confirmation to feel her worth. From childhood, women are taught that leaving is weakness, that you need to fight, forgive, prove, save. But the truth is, fighting for a relationship where you're the only fighter destroys the soul. True strength isn't in the ability to endure pain, but in the decision to stop it. Leaving requires much more courage than staying, because staying is familiar, and leaving means challenging the system in which you lived on autopilot for a long time. And the man who previously considered your departure weakness suddenly begins to understand. You didn't run. You freed yourself, not from him, but from dependency, from the constant need to be heard, understood, accepted. When you leave not in hysteria, but in silence, with clarity and dignity, a special power appears in you, one that doesn't need words. You don't explain, you don't justify. You're simply no longer where you're not respected. And this silence isn't just silence, it's the silence of strength. Because a woman who refuses to be a victim stops being an object for others' manipulations. She becomes a subject, one who chooses herself where to be, to whom to give her time, with whom to share herself. This isn't escape. This is maturity. This is the moment when you no longer ask, why did he treat me this way? But begin to ask, why did I allow this? And at this point, you enter a new phase, not restoration of relationships, but restoration of boundaries. Now every step you take is directed not toward returning to the past, but toward creating the future, where there's no longer room for those who wound, where value isn't in others' opinions, but in your internal sense of self. You reclaim your space, physical, emotional, spiritual, space where you are the center, not from egoism, but by birthright. And the most interesting thing in this process, you no longer need his participation. You don't need his gaze to feel beautiful. Don't need his approval to be confident. Don't need his recognition to know you're worthy of love. You fill yourself on your own, and this is the greatest transformation, because a woman who stops giving energy into the void begins to flourish, without noise, without drama, just quietly from within. And that's when something he absolutely wasn't ready for begins. When you no longer try to return, he for the first time begins to want to return you, not because you became needed, but because you became unreachable. And in this new light, his own actions begin to acquire weight, because as long as you were near, consequences weren't felt. And now he remains alone with the emptiness into which he himself pushed you, and precisely in this emptiness, not knowing how to return you, he for the first time asks himself, was I worthy of her at all? And here he remains in silence, where your voice used to sound. He looks at his phone screen where there's not a single new message. Goes to your social media hoping for a hook, at least a hint, that you're still thinking about him. But there's no hint there. Everything that previously served as proof of his influence has disappeared. He no longer influences your mood, your words, or your direction. And with each day, This emptiness that seemed temporary at first becomes more and more palpable. It stops being a pause and turns into an ending. Now he has no emotional chaos in which he could hide. No more tears he could interpret as, "I'm still important." No more confrontations where he could play the role of the magnanimous. And the scariest thing? No more attempts to save, which means no justifications left. All he hears now is the echo of his own words, with which he once devalued you, and all he sees is the cold result of his actions. And you, on the other side of this silence, but you're no longer who you were. You're not sitting in a corner with an extinguished gaze. You're not building in your head a dialogue where he suddenly understands everything. You're living for real, not to spite him, not for jealousy, for yourself. You invest in yourself, in your body, your mind, your dreams, and with each day something strengthens inside you. What was previously scattered under his steps is now being built into a stone foundation. You're not just recovering, you're being reborn. He may try to return with words, gestures, messages, memories, but you're no longer where he left you, because a woman who once realized she no longer needs others' recognition changes forever. And now you don't react by inertia. You choose, and choice is the highest form of power, and precisely here begins what previously seemed impossible. You forgive. Not him, yourself. Forgiveness isn't concession. It's breaking the invisible chain that kept you tied to pain. You forgive because you no longer want to drag behind you the resentment that burns your resources. You don't return him to your life. You simply free yourself. And in this liberation, there's no weakness. This is the most mature and pure act of love for yourself. And him? He doesn't understand what's happening. He thought you would hold on, thought he could disappear, and then return to the same house. But the door once open to him is now closed, not from anger, from healing. And here he for the first time begins to feel the weight of real loss. Because loss isn't when you're not near, but when he no longer has access to your world. And this moment is the first step toward his real reflection, if of course he's even capable of it. And here he stands before a closed door, behind which there's no longer access, not because you hold a grudge, but because you healed, because you didn't just leave. You went inside yourself and found there what he didn't. Calmness, wholeness, dignity. He can't enter, can't knock, because he intuitively feels. Now your life doesn't revolve around him. There's no longer room for his games, justifications, half-truths. And precisely at this moment, he encounters something destructive for male ego. The absence of consequences for you, and the weight of consequences for him. Before he thought, she'll always come back, and each of your emotions only confirmed this certainty. But now, when you don't return, don't write, don't demonstrate suffering, he begins to doubt, first in you, and then, scarier, in himself. Because if you moved forward, if you're not destroyed, not emptied, but on the contrary, shine, grow, breathe freely, it means the problem wasn't in you. It means everything he tried to escape from, everything he tried to shift onto your shoulders, now returns to him without filter, without interpretations, in pure form, as his own actions. And in this moment he begins to understand something he long hid from himself. You weren't weak, but loyal, not intrusive, but loving, not hysterical, but wounded. But now it's too late. Now you're not the one ready to listen to promises without action, not the one who'll give a second, third, fifth chance, hoping he'll change. You're the one who finally chose herself, and this for him is a new type of loss, not stormy, not loud, not dramatic, but silent, final, and real. He can tell himself, I'll find another, But somewhere deep down he knows no one will care so sincerely. No one will see in him the good that you saw, even when he was blind to your value, because now he understands. Women like you don't come back. They leave forever, without screaming, without revenge. They simply disappear. And precisely this disappearance becomes his bitterest lesson, because it leaves no hope. And you're further and further, not physically, energetically. You no longer vibrate at the frequency of pain. You're no longer attracted to those who destroy you. You're now a magnet for those who feel, respect, see, because you see yourself. And this shift isn't external, it's internal. And internal changes are the most stable. They don't require approval. They don't seek attention. They simply are, like a wall through which no one can penetrate anymore without permission. And now he encounters not just your silence, but your freedom. And this is the only thing he truly doesn't control. He never feared your anger. He knew how to deal with it. Ignore, turn into a joke, pretend not to hear. But with your freedom, he doesn't know what to do, because freedom leaves no hooks. It gives no catches to cling to. And here he feels for the first time that he didn't just lose influence. He disappeared from your reality, as if he never existed. This is the destructive moment when the illusion of irreplaceability begins to crumble under the weight of facts. He was used to believing he was the center of your universe, that you wouldn't cope without him, that you'd suffer, try to return, watch, wait. And now he looks at you as he's never seen you. Not weak, not broken, not desperate, but whole, calm, confident. You're not waving at him from the past. You've gone into the present, where he simply isn't. And here he encounters the most painful question a man can ask himself. Was I actually needed by her? This question, like poison, slowly spreads through his inner world. It corrodes what he considered stable, his ego, his conviction, his sense of his value in your life. He begins to remember what he didn't notice then, your kindness, patience, warmth, your eyes full of hope, your voice that knew how to forgive. All this now seems to him not just distant, but inaccessible. He remembers not from love, he remembers from the horror of loss, because it finally reaches him. Everything he once considered a guarantee never was one. You're no longer his, and not because someone else took your place, but because he himself freed it. When he didn't see your value, when he played at distance, when he caused pain, thinking he could return whenever he wanted, he can no longer return, not because you're taking revenge, but because you're no longer waiting. And in this realization, not only the illusion of power collapses for him, but his image of himself. Jung wrote, "The male psyche falls into crisis when it loses the illusion of control." This is exactly what's happening to him now. He's not just losing you, he's losing himself in your eyes, and even scarier, in his own. Because if the woman he underestimated only became stronger without him, it means everything he believed about himself was a lie. And you, meanwhile, continue to go. Not because you need to, because you can. And each of your steps isn't just movement forward. It's distance he'll never be able to overcome again. And here comes silence, but no longer the one that was after pain, but the one that sounds inside you. This isn't emptiness. This is peace. You no longer think about where he is and with whom. Don't check what he's posting. Don't catch yourself waiting. There's no more battle inside, because there's no more attachment. Not because you became hardened, but because you finally came home, to yourself. And he feels this, not through words, not through actions, energetically. He feels you no longer live in the old scenario, where he was the meaning. He's no longer the center. He no longer matters. His name no longer causes pain, his voice no longer causes trembling. His attempts to return cause only one thing: indifference. And indifference isn't the absence of love, it's completion. You're not taking revenge, you're not playing, you're simply free. And this is the most crushing thing a man can see. Not that you left, but that you no longer look back. He understands. You became the woman who didn't just survive betrayal, but used it as fuel for ascent. Now, he can regret, can realize, can try to change, but you're already too far, and he's no longer the one to whom you'd open your new space. And you no longer seek justice, because your life fills with meaning not through struggle, but through movement forward. You're not a victim and not a victor. You're a woman who went beyond someone else's drama and became the heroine of her own story. The true strength of a woman manifests not in proving her worth to a man, but in no longer doing so. Silence, departure, calmness. These aren't weakness. This is maturity. This is an act of love for yourself. And when you rise to this level, where no one else's opinion determines your internal state anymore, you no longer lose, because you've already found yourself. And now you're where he'll never reach again. And this is your quiet but absolute victory.